The rain hammered against the concrete like bullets, each drop exploding into 1,000 fragments on the grimy pavement. Leo Martinez pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid November air. For 3 years, he'd been chasing the same elusive dream that had brought countless others to this unforgiving city. Tonight, that dream felt more distant than ever. His latest demo had been rejected by the 7th record label this month. The words still echoed in his mind like a broken record. Lacks originality. We're looking for something fresh, something that hasn't been done before. He'd poured his soul into those songs, stayed up countless nights crafting melodies that he thought would change everything. But apparently, his soul wasn't enough. The subway entrance loomed ahead, like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. Leo descended the slippery steps, each one taking him deeper into the bowels of the city. The familiar smell of dampness and decay greeted him, mixed with something else. Something that made him pause on the last step and tilt his head like a curious animal. Music, not the usual cacophony of street performers trying to earn enough for their next meal, but something different. Something that seemed to float through the air like smoke, weaving between the pillars and bouncing off the tiled walls with an almost supernatural quality. Leo followed the sound, his footsteps echoing in the nearly empty tunnel. There, beneath a flickering fluorescent light that cast dancing shadows on the wall, sat an old man with a guitar. His fingers moved across the strings with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime learning their secrets. The melody was unlike anything Leo had ever heard. It was hauntingly beautiful, filled with a longing that seemed to reach into his chest and squeeze his heart. The old man's name was Silas, though Leo wouldn't learn this until much later. His clothes were tattered, his face weathered by years of living rough, but his eyes held a spark that spoke of dreams that had never quite died. Between verses, a deep, rattling cough would escape his lips, but he would continue playing as if his life depended on it. Leo stood frozen, mesmerized by the raw emotion pouring from the old man's guitar. This was it. This was the sound he'd been searching for his entire life. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, positioning himself behind a concrete pillar where the shadows would hide him. His finger trembled as he pressed record. The melody flowed into his phone like liquid gold, every note captured in digital perfection. Leo's heart raced as he realized what he was doing, but he couldn't stop himself. This was his chance, his one shot at everything he'd ever wanted. When the song ended, Leo quickly fumbled in his wallet and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He tossed it into the guitar case and hurried away, his footsteps echoing behind him like the sound of his own guilt chasing him through the tunnel. That night, Leo sat in his cramped apartment, playing the recording over and over again. Each time, the melody seemed to reveal new layers, new depths that he hadn't noticed before. He picked up his own guitar and began to play along, adding his own touches, his own interpretation to the haunting tune. By dawn, he had created something extraordinary. The melody remained the same, but he had woven his own lyrics around it, crafted arrangements that elevated the simple street performance into something radio-ready. He called it Underground Echo, and as he played it back, he knew with absolute certainty that this song would change his life forever. The next morning, Leo walked into the offices of Meridian Records with his head held high and a demo that contained his stolen masterpiece. Sarah Chen, the A&R representative who had rejected his previous submissions, listened to the first 30 seconds before her eyes widened with recognition of something special. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is exactly what we've been looking for. Where did this come from, Leo? It's unlike anything you've shown us before." Leo's mouth felt dry as sandpaper, but he managed to smile. "Sometimes inspiration strikes when you least expect it. I guess I finally found my voice." The lie came so easily that it scared him. But as he watched Sarah's excitement grow, as she began talking about recording sessions and radio play and tour opportunities, Leo pushed his guilt deeper into the dark corners of his mind where it couldn't touch this moment. 3 months later, Underground Echo was climbing the charts faster than anyone at Meridian Records had expected. Leo found himself living in a world he had only dreamed of. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, interviews with magazines that had never bothered to return his calls before. He was in Studio A at Abbey Road, wearing noise-cancelling headphones worth more than his old apartment's monthly rent, when he heard it for the first time. They were mixing the final version of the album, and he was listening to Underground Echo with the kind of crystal-clear audio equipment that revealed every tiny detail. There, in the bridge between the second chorus and the final verse, clear as a church bell, was the sound of an old man's cough. Deep, rattling, unmistakably real. Leo ripped the headphones off his head so fast that they clattered to the floor. "Did you hear that?" he asked Sarah, who was standing behind the mixing board with the engineer. "Hear what?" Sarah looked genuinely confused. "It sounds perfect to me. We might finally have our Grammy contender." Leo put the headphones back on, his hands shaking slightly. The cough was still there, woven into the fabric of the song like a thread that couldn't be removed. But when he asked the engineer to isolate that section, when he played it through the studio monitors for everyone to hear, there was nothing but his voice and the instruments. That night, Leo drove back to the subway tunnel, where he had first encountered Silas. The old man was nowhere to be found. Leo asked other homeless individuals if they knew where Silas might be, describing the weathered face and the guitar that had produced such beautiful music. "Silas? Oh, honey, he passed away about 2 months ago," said a woman wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing. "Poor thing had been sick for a long time. That cough of his just got worse and worse until—" She trailed off, shaking her head sadly. Leo felt the world tilt around him. 2 months ago, right around the time his song had started its climb up the charts, right around the time the ghostly cough had begun haunting his recordings. The weeks that followed became a waking nightmare. Every time Underground Echo played on the radio, Leo would hear Silas's cough mixed in with his stolen melody. During a live interview on a popular morning show, the cough was so loud in Leo's ears that he stopped mid-sentence, causing an awkward silence that had the host scrambling to fill dead air. "Are you feeling all right, Leo?" the host had asked, genuine concern in her voice. "I'm fine," Leo had lied, though sweat was beading on his forehead. Just a little tired from the tour." But he wasn't fine. Sleep became impossible as the cough seemed to echo through his dreams. He would wake up in cold sweats, convinced that Silas was standing at the foot of his bed, guitar in hand, playing the melody that had become both Leo's salvation and his curse. The success of Underground Echo continued to grow. It hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and suddenly Leo was being invited to perform at the biggest music festivals in the world. The Grammy nominations were announced, and his song was nominated in 3 categories. Everything he had ever wanted was finally his, but the guilt was eating him alive from the inside out, like a cancer that grew stronger with each accolade, each standing ovation, each interview where he was praised for his incredible artistic breakthrough. The breaking point came at Coachella. Leo was standing on the main stage, looking out at a sea of faces that stretched beyond the horizon. 60,000 people had come to hear him perform, and Underground Echo was scheduled to close out his set. This was the moment every musician dreams of, the pinnacle of success that most artists never reach. As the familiar opening chords filled the desert air, the crowd erupted in recognition. 60,000 voices began singing along to words that Leo had written around a melody he had stolen from a dead man. But in his ears, drowning out the crowd, drowning out his own voice, was the sound of Silas's cough, louder than it had ever been before. Leo's fingers fumbled on the guitar strings. His voice cracked as he tried to sing the second verse. The cough in his head was so loud now that it felt like his skull might split open from the pressure. He could see the confusion rippling through the crowd as his performance fell apart in real time. And then, without warning, Leo stopped playing entirely. The band continued for a few bars before realizing something was wrong and grinding to a halt. 60,000 people fell silent, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of what they were witnessing. Leo approached the microphone, his legs shaking so badly he wasn't sure they would support him. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but the arena's sound system carried his words to every corner of the festival grounds. "This song," he began, his voice breaking on the words. "This song that you all love, that's made me famous, that's given me everything I thought I wanted. It's not mine." A murmur rippled through the crowd like a wave. Leo took a shuddering breath and continued. "I stole it from a homeless man named Silas. He was playing it in a subway tunnel, and I recorded him without his permission. I built my entire career on something that belonged to someone else, someone who died before he could ever know that his music was touching millions of people." The silence that followed was deafening. Leo could see phone screens lighting up throughout the crowd as people began recording his confession, as the story began spreading across social media in real time. "Silas never got to see a stage like this," Leo continued, tears streaming down his face. "He never got to hear 60,000 people singing his melody. He died alone and forgotten, and I let the world believe that his genius belonged to me." As the last words left his lips, something miraculous happened. The cough that had haunted him for months, the ghostly presence that had turned his success into a nightmare, simply vanished. For the first time since that night in the recording studio, Leo's mind was quiet. The aftermath was swift and merciless. By the time Leo left the stage, footage of his confession was trending worldwide. Record labels dropped him, radio stations pulled his music from their playlists, and concert venues cancelled his remaining tour dates. The Grammy nominations were rescinded, and the royalty checks stopped coming. But Leo felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. The weight that had been crushing his chest was gone, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like freedom. 6 months later, Leo found himself back in the subway tunnel where it had all begun. He was carrying an old acoustic guitar, nothing like the expensive instruments he had grown accustomed to during his brief time at the top. His designer clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and a worn jacket. He began to play Silas's melody, not for fame or money or recognition, but as a tribute to the man whose art he had stolen. As he played, he told the story to anyone who would listen, ensuring that Silas's name would be remembered along with his music. With the money he had earned before his confession, Leo had established the Silas Foundation, dedicated to supporting homeless musicians and ensuring they received credit and compensation for their work. It wasn't enough to undo what he had done, but it was a start. As he played the final notes of the haunting melody in the exact spot where he had first heard it, Leo realized that he had finally found his true voice. Not in the stolen genius of another man, but in the honesty of his own remorse and the determination to make things right. The ghost of Silas no longer haunted his music, but his memory would live on in every note Leo played, a reminder that true artistry cannot be stolen, only honored. What would you have done in Leo's situation? Would guilt have driven you to confess, or would you have kept the secret forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Top Life Stories for more incredible tales that will make you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world.